Welcome to another installment of the Final Scoop podcast. My name is Robert Schinetsky, the supplement engineer. Joining me as always is my international band of brothers, Robert Samborsky, Apollon Nutrition, Shane Babyface Smith, Stack.com, and joining us all the way from Ireland, Dr. Dean St. Mart, renowned industry pharmacologist and the formulator for supplement needs. Welcome, my friends, and Dr. Dean, thank you for joining us on a Saturday. I know it's nighttime over where you are in Ireland, so we appreciate you hanging with us later over there.
No, absolute pleasure. Thanks very much for the invite. It's an honor to speak with the three of you guys.
Absolutely. So anytime we have a first-time guest on here, we like to get their backstory. We all come from very disparate backgrounds, and how all of us end up in this crazy industry that we call home is always something I find fascinating. So if you don't mind, walk us through a little bit of your personal history. And for all the listeners tuning in, feel free to fire away any questions in the comment sections. We'll get to each and every one of them during our chat here with Dr. Dean. So if you have anything special about his background, specific questions, mechanisms of action, product formulations, any of that, give that away, or just any kind of fun stuff you want to know too. We'll get to anything and everything. But first, the floor is yours, Dr. Dean.
So for most people that probably don't follow me or have never heard of me, my name's Dr. Dean St. Mart. I hold a first-class double honors degree in chemistry and pharmaceutical chemistry. So my initial background was in drug development and drug design, and obviously pharmacology. And then from there, I went on and I'd done a PhD in synthetic organic chemistry. So how I sort of ended up in the fitness industry was originally I was a kickboxer in my teens, and a nasty accident in training led to me smashing bones in my right ankle. So from there, I sort of transitioned away from kickboxing more so into like gym training, and then eventually convinced myself to compete in bodybuilding. And that was at the age of 21, 22. So at that point, obviously I started to become more and more interested in the pharmacology side of bodybuilding, you could say, and how we apply pharmacology to bodybuilding. And I was always a very, I guess, reserved person, even within like the Irish fitness industry. I was the kind of person that if someone spoke to me, I'd give them my opinion on various things, but I wasn't very vocal, or I'd like to keep to myself. And it was when I met my wife in 2015 that she was sort of like, quite a lot of stuff that you shouldn't really be keeping it to yourself. You should be getting out there on social media and start trying to educate people, even if it's just, putting up simple little things that might make a difference to someone. And so from there, I started to post a little more actively on social media while, I guess, just follow my own bodybuilding path. So how my interest in supplementation, and obviously what I'm sort of well known for, is applying functional medicine to bodybuilding. So using a method of figuring out what's the root cause to a disease and then going after the mechanism of that. And obviously with the formulations that eventually came with supplement needs, they're all based off that sort of principle of functional medicine. So my, I guess, interest in supplements came from my own preservation of my own health, and obviously trying to do things as safely as possible and I guess as intelligent as possible to ultimately preserve longevity. And then in 2018, I was a customer. So Supplement Needs, the company that I formulate for now, I was a customer of those guys for about a year and a half. And then Lee, who owns the company, used to just message me on Instagram. We used to DM one another because obviously I was an educator for Jordan Peter's website. And that's sort of, again, where my biggest popularity to gain and traction of my notoriety within the UK was obviously through Jordan Peter's website. Yeah. So Lee was starting to release his own product line through Supplement Needs. And I was impressed with some of the formulations that he was proposing to release. Like, for example, he had a multivitamin that had chelated forms of minerals in the correct dosages. He was choosing 5 tetrahydromethylfolate instead of folic acid. silly little things like that where I appreciate the extent of him making a product that actually done what it was supposed to, that actually had bioavailable forms. And I guess in the background, I was sort of taking my own supplements for my own health. And I started to say to him, well, what about this product? He had like a ZMA with 5-HTP.
Mm-hmm.
And I turned around to him and said, well, what if you got rid of the 5-HTP and ZMA and went with these ingredients? And I gave him a list of 6 ingredients. And I said to him, this is my own personal sleep stack. Now, at this point, I'd researched into the mechanisms of human sleep and how we can obviously enhance human sleep with simple biochemistry. And I basically said to him, I'm fairly certain if you put this product out, call a sleep stack, it's going to probably be a game changer in the UK fitness industry, because most competitive bodybuilders at some extent will suffer from insomnia. So the original sleep stack, I'm sure you've probably seen it from 3 or 4 years ago, was literally 6 individual tubs of 5-HTP, magnesium, zinc, theanine, vitamin B6, the P5P and vitamin B5. And you had to open each one to take out a capsule of each. And eventually, Lee started to see, the sleep stack, when it was released, when people started to actually experience the product, it just kept selling out. And I said to him, okay, well, the proof of concept is there. The popularity is there. The reason why we originally went with the 6 individual ingredients was obviously people who take SSRI antidepressant medication, they can't use 5-HTP because of the potential for serotonin overload.
Correct.
And what we wanted to do was offer a 5-HTP less product, where if someone was taking SSRIs, they could take the other 5 and leave out the 5-HTP. Mm-hmm. But as strange as it is, it just never really took off. No one really ever bought the 5-HTP-less version. Either they weren't aware of obviously the product, or there just was no demand that people were happy with their sleep on antidepressants. So from there, we moved into the all-in-one formulation later in the year. But in the background, I was sort of feeding Lee more and more formulas. And I always laugh looking back on like the last 4 years, because every time I sent Lee a formulation, within like 3 or 4 weeks, he was in discussion with the manufacturers to have it being sourced, and obviously getting the ingredients together, getting the margins and the minimum quantities for order. Mm-hmm. But he never ever turned around to me and said, no, I'm not making that product. So from there, like the sleep stack, then we added the CV or the heart stack, the Ashtrag Flow, which was originally kidney and blood pressure stack, and then the liver stack. And what I was trying to do here, like I said to Lee, was from my own personal experience, when I was buying supplements, I was buying it from several different companies. And mainly what I normally do is just go on Amazon and go add to cart, type next ingredient, add to cart. Yeah. And so you're getting it in from like 7 or 8 different sellers, and there was different lead times. And it just got messy that you were trying to keep on top of, okay, I'm running out of this ingredient, I better order that. But I'm also running out of this. And you're sort of keeping on top of buying 7 or 8 different supplements at one time. Mm-hmm. And I basically said to him, what if we create a company that, like what your company title, Supplement Needs, caters to the supplement needs of the bodybuilding and fitness industry of the UK. So if someone needs heart health support, there's a product there. If they want to stack it then with liver support, there's a product there. And basically they only need to go to your website, order what they need through the product range, and literally have like a one-stop shop for catering pretty much anything you can think of within the bodybuilding sphere supplementation. So over the last 3 years, I guess, I think we've expanded to, at last count, about 35 products, which is phenomenal. And I've still got maybe another 6 or 7 coming up that's in development at the moment, and in ingredient sourcing with the manufacturers. But there's never been, like I said, a roadblock from Lee, and every time he's put his faith in me for a product, it's always come true. There has never been a product that's flopped, basically. So I guess, touch wood, there's been some luck there, but the whole ethos of the brand was that I was not willing to put supplements out for the sake of profit. And Lee is the same, I guess, mindset as me when it comes to business, that he'd rather put customers first and then think of the profit afterwards. As in, I mean, our newest one, Pre-Pump Plus, I was really egging Lee to create that product, and the profit margin on that, like the margin to create that product, was so slim that I had to really convince, was like, just trust me, with what we've put in this is going to take up a big niche of, I guess, non-stimulant based pump product within that I guess field of products on the market. And again, he took a chance on me, and the volume of sales over the last 3 weeks since it's been released have spoken for itself. But with that, I guess the reselling capability of the brand then sort of diminishes, because there's not much margin there for either distributors or resellers to take advantage of the product, unlike some other brands that put a bit of leeway there to allow reselling and distribution. But
Dr. Zine, if you don't mind me asking, because I mean, we also kind of like dealing with the same, I wouldn't say a problem, but an issue, so to speak. And I wanted just to find out, how does it work in Ireland or UK specifically? You have obviously a good product, and I saw the formulations are obviously fantastic. I mean, it's very, very simple label, but it's to the point, and obviously people that want top product, they definitely, your product is the product to go to, and I commend you on that, because it's absolutely fantastic, and much respect to you, sir, for that. But my question is that you said the sales been increasing, right? And obviously the popularity too, and it's I suspect it's among those people that are knowledgeable and can actually read the label, or maybe perhaps you educating them on the label. That is something that I strongly believe in. So when you sell the product, is it mostly direct to consumer in UK? Because I would suspect a product like that to sell to retailers and distributors would be close to impossible, as most of them obviously looking for profit and don't really give a damn about the quality in most cases, so to speak. I'm just being honest. So how do you deal with that problem or issue?
So I guess I'm not too involved with the business side of things on Lee's sort of side. I'm the guy that sits in the background that has the fun job of saying to Lee, this is the product I want to make. Lee looks at it and goes, okay. So when it comes to dealing with, I guess, the warehouse and the distribution, Lee's the main guy that's dealing with that and the running of the business. Now, with the likes of, as you said, there are companies out there that are more than willing to put products out for the sake of profit. And I only done an Ask Me Anything on Instagram, I think it was last week, a week after the pre-series was released. And the whole issue was, when I made our pre-series, I didn't want to go into the market, because I'd been, alongside being an educator on Jordan Peter's website, I helped formulate some of the early Trained by JP nutrition products.
That was going to be my question. Yeah.
And I felt Prepare, which was the original pre-workout, not the reformulation, the original Prepare. Me and Jordan sat and worked through how we were going to create a pre-workout. And that was the same concept. Make a product that didn't really cater to profit margins, but catered to, again, making a superb product that, if you really know your stuff in the supplement industry, that you're willing to see the transparency on the label of what we've gone to the detail of creating this product.
Right.
So when it came to formulating the pre-series for Supplement Needs, I stayed out of the pre-workout market for at least, I think it was 3 years. I think Prepare came out early 2019, 2 years now. Here we are in 2021. And I kept saying to Lee, I'm not willing to put a pre-workout out unless it is significantly different than what's on the market right now. Because, to be honest, I'm not willing to sell my soul for it to just put out a caffeine-based powder that's sprinkled with X, Y, and Z.
No way.
And yeah, and I remember last August I went over to Supplement Needs HQ, and I was sitting down at the desk beside Lee, and I said to him, "Actually, I've got a brilliant idea," and it just hit me like that. I said to him, "This is how we're going to enter the pre-workout market. We're going to make a pump formula that's non-stimulant based. We're going to make a nootropic caffeine-based product, and then we're going to make a stimulant-based, and we stack the three of them together. So you have the aspects of what's all in the popular pre-workouts, but you're giving complete control to the consumer of, do they want to stack caffeine with pump, or do they want pump by itself, or do they want just pure stim?" And from there, that's where I sort of put together our current pre-series. Mm-hmm. But with the pre-series, like I said, pre-pump plus retails for £40. And when you look at the ingredients that have been chosen in it, between like the full clinical dose of nitrosogene, the S-acetylglutathione, a mento pump, I was really, I guess, stubborn with Lee that I wasn't willing to sacrifice anything on the original formulation that I sent to him, regardless of the price. Good. And I guess the whole I guess point to what you've asked is, it comes down to educating the consumer on the product. And with that Ask Me Anything last week, I had people complain that a full serving of pump, focus, and stim was costing £3.46, I think. So that's for basically a 28 ingredient serving, all at full transparent dosages at £3.46. And that was for pump, stim, and focus. Now, if you just took pump by itself, it was £1.20. And if you took pump and focus together, it was £2.50. Now, what I started to do was I asked the audience on Instagram, send me all your pre-workouts, and I will break it down product by product and break it down cost per serving, and I will tell you whether your product's good or not. And there were some products on there that were absolutely woeful, that were working out at a cost serving of about £1.40. And when I looked at the ingredient list, I can tell you now the thing could be formulated for about 30p. And it's sort of like, you know, you're trying to tell these people, okay, they're buying their pre-workout, say, at a retail price of $29.99, so £30. And you think, this is fantastic, I'm getting 30 servings. And look at all these ingredients in it. And then when you break it down, it's really like a sprinkle of citrulline, 250 milligrams of caffeine. Some of them are really silly, and they put in like arginine alpha-ketoglutarate, you know, and then a bit of taurine, like real simple ingredients that, you know, we know the cost of them isn't really that significant. But you have this consumer thinking that, oh, this is brilliant because I'm getting it for £30. And literally by the end of breaking down, I think I broke down 29 products, and it ranged from like Total War to Alphagen. I went through pretty much all the top brands that were there. Innova Farm.
Watch out, you're dropping the names now.
Yeah. No.
That's okay.
You know, I'm not saying anything.
You are like you're now like aerobic.
But I was basically showing the people on my story, like some of them I agreed with, some of them I said, oh yeah, that's great value for what you're paying based on what the formula is. But I was trying to get people's mindset around, because this all stemmed off a reviewer reviewed our product. And one of the letdowns they put to it was, oh, it's £3.46 for the full 3-product serving. And I thought, okay, yes, that's very valid. Some people aren't going to be able to afford that. But that's to include stim. And in my mind, stim plus within our range, it's not something I want to keep long term, to be honest, because there's a lot of other formulations on the market that purely cater for people that like to get off their face. And Stim Plus was an edge where I wanted to add in these really strong tyramine, dopamine driving, I guess, ingredients, and the likes of the, I guess, amine derived plants like Kigella and juglans, where I'm just providing this huge dopamine high from those stimulants. But to be honest, there's other products I think that are better than Stim Plus. Now, the only thing that was interesting about Stim Plus was I wanted to do a stimulant-based product that had no caffeine. So people that don't get on well with caffeine from a nervous system perspective, where they're having, I guess, heightened sympathetic nervous system activity after they've trained, potentially dynamine and the theacrine might offset that nervous system activity while still having the stimulatory properties on the adenosine receptors. So I had this discussion with Lee last week, and to be honest, Stim Plus probably won't stay around. Mm-hmm. But for Focus and Pump at £2.50 for a serving of both combined, I mean, you have guys that walk into their local gym and get a scoop of C4 for £2.
They're an energy drink or something, and they're paying $2 or $3 a can for that too.
Yeah, and I mean, okay, I said to someone, if you're really in this for saving money and you don't want this ergogenic benefit of using a supplement like that, well, then save your money for food. Buy a cheap bag of citrulline malate and a tin of Nescafe coffee, and away you go. If that's the sort of budget route you want to go, there's the perfect setup for you to have a pump, bit of steam, spend the rest on food that's actually going to be more probably beneficial to you.
V3 Assassin coming in.
I got a couple of formulation questions for you, Dr. Dean.
Yeah.
I guess some clarification stuff. On the Pre-Stim Plus formula, so you've got dynamine in there at 250 milligrams and theacrine in there at 150 milligrams. Is that the yield, or is that so is it 250 milligrams of the 40%, so we're getting 40% of the 250, or is the 250 the payload that we're getting?
No, the 40%.
Okay.
So typical to what you find in most other formulations. So, to be honest, like I said, with Stim Plus, we don't have a lot of other than is Xynomite is the new one that's getting some interest.
Yeah, and I'm on it.
Between Xynomite, dynamine, and theacrine are really the only sort of xanthine-derived compounds that we have available to us from a stimulatory perspective. But like I said, Stim Plus to me was just trying to add an element where I'm not putting any of these high stim compounds that people tend to buy other brands for, but was still giving people the option to stack it into Focus Plus if they wanted to add these products. Because I myself, I enjoy Kigella Africans and I enjoy Juglans and other products, and it gives you a nice sense of well-being when you're training. But other people don't like it, so I figured with Focus, give really a really high nootropic drive from the high choline donors, give again more precursors to dopamine through the tyrosine, the phenylalanine, and then obviously round it off with the neurogenic compounds like lion's mane and ginkgo. Whereas I guess other companies with pre-workouts tends to just come from either will throw in standard caffeine dose, standard tyrosine, or I guess even a small bit of choline, and then add in huperzine A to try and make the product look fancy. Mm-hmm. So with Stim, like I said, I don't see it staying around long term, to be honest. And again, we have the whole safety issue surrounding dynamine and theacrine in the EU anyway.
See, I actually thought Stim was probably the coolest one of the lot.
Yeah, it's a cool way to spin it. Like, there's no caffeine, but it's got like some of the other kind of like gas compounds in it. Again,
you get I'd seen stim-free pumps, I'd seen Focus with mild caffeine, but the caffeineless heavy stim pre, when you see it, I'm just like I've seen those ingredients separate, stand alone sometimes, but never together in a pre-workout without caffeine. And the versatility of it, it's almost one of those things that you just have instead of buying a standalone caffeine or whatever, because you can combine that with a fat burner make it a fucking an enjoyable fat burner. You can combine it with a mainstream pre-workout, make it a better pre-workout. Like these things because a lot of those things that are in there are not in your typical pre-workout. Like they're in a lot, but they're not in those mainstream ones that are at that $30 for 30 servings. So it's like just a supplement that I think is well worth having. Maybe I mean, before it's gone, but just to toss it in, it's great.
That's the other thing. Like I mean, less than it works out at about 99p, one pound per serving for what you're getting in it. It is well worth it, to be honest. But like I said, it's one of those products that I just wanted to have there, to have that, like what we're known for in supplement needs, for stacking. So there's the synergy then of the three of them stacked together.
It comes off as a very advanced. Like I said, I like it for its versatility. But if you're someone who's like, I want one pre-workout, that's it. Probably not for them. But it's just I just as a regular pre-workout user, I think it's just fucking badass just to be like, you know what? Like you can make something intense without making it half a gram of caffeine. You can just basically throw it in with anything.
Now, how Stim Plus really actually came about was Richard Foster, who's the owner of Strom in the UK, so Strom Supplements. He tried a caffeineless version of Stimumax and he sent it to me. And I guess this is sort of where, if you're clued into how supplements feel and you sort of formulate supplements where you beta try your products, Rich sent me two shakers that had no label on it, and he just said to me, take that about 90 minutes before you train and let me know how you get on. And I was working night shift at the time, so we had a gym on site at my job, because my actual job is I'm a chemical engineer. So I'm a chemical engineer for Intel. And I remember taking the product and going to the gym to train on my lunch break. And I texted him because he was still awake. This was at, I think, 11:30 at night. And I said to him, this almost feels like a caffeineless version of Stimumax Black, where I can sense there's like a high from Juglins or Kigela. There's something in there. And then there's a couple of other things like tyrosine and alpha GPC based on how my focus and mentality was. And he actually wrote back, he goes, that's exactly what the product is. It's Stimumax Black without caffeine. Mm-hmm. But he said, do you not find that it's sort of wearing off very quick, that it's sort of hitting you, and then within about 40-45 minutes it's sort of, that's it, it's gone? I was like, yeah, I can see where you're coming from with that it's not staying in your system that long, that it's driving you through the whole workout. When it hits you, you notice it, and then it sort of quickly drops away. And that was when I messaged him with the formula for Stim Plus. I said to him, I think I've cracked your caffeineless pre-workout that you've been trying to do. And he said to me, how'd you manage to do it? I was like, well, just had to really try and stabilize it with a bit more, I guess, dopamine drive. And then obviously the use of the T-cream and dynamine. Mm-hmm. And that sort of then takes advantage of the mood effects of the Kigela and the Juglins, and then obviously the standardized NN phenyldimethylethylmine, the NeuroPA. That was a suggestion from our manufacturer, because we were just putting in Arrhyodrenesis, the 40% extract of Arrhyodrenesis, and our manufacturer actually said, well, we've NeuroPA here on hand. We can, when we're doing the beta trial samples for Stim, I'll do some with the 40% Arrhya, and I'll do some with the NeuroPA standard ingredient, and you can see which one you prefer. And I guess if you've tried NeuroPA or tried Stim Plus, you'll know the sort of effect that NeuroPA has on your neurochemistry. It's a lot more pronounced than a standardized Arrhyodrenesis plant extract. But yeah, the whole idea of Stim Plus, I have to give credit to Rich for the idea of discussion of trying to do a caffeine-free product, for the simple fact of some people's appetites, etc., get completely shot from caffeine-based pre-workouts.
Yeah, definitely a novel thing. And so the NeuroPEA, because that's not an ingredient we've seen here stateside much. So is that just the active, like, ass-kicking alkaloid from Arrhyodrenesis? So it's the NN-dimethylmethylamine citrate?
It is, yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
And that within the EU, if there's any EU listeners, that is sort of like a grey area ingredient where it's not novel and it's not banned. But as soon as you put any sort of mention of PEA into a European formulation, because PEA is banned, you start to draw some attention from in the UK.
I would say it's a gray area basically here.
Yeah. Like, I mean, in the UK, we have the MHRA, which is the medicines and I guess regulatory agency. And how the UK is broken up is it has different districts, and then within each district you have an enforcing officer. So you could be in Scotland and you'd have NeuroPA in a product and nothing is said to you, and you could be in London and your local authority officer will actually go, we're going to investigate you because you've got PA in the product. And you're like, well, the name is NeuroPA, but it's not actually phenylethylamine, it's a derivative. But you're bringing this attention onto yourself. And like I said, with Stim Plus, with the NeuroPA, and I guess with the Dynamine, which is novel, there are some gray areas there that Stim Plus could be open to interpretation from an MHRA standpoint. And at that point, you either submit a claim to defend the product, or you have to pull the product. And that's the difference between the UK and EU market versus the US. Unless you draw the attention of the FDA, you can pretty much do anything you want with your label claim in the US. Whereas in the UK, if you have a local, authority auditor that does not like you, you're in trouble. And I'm speaking from experience, because we had one woman in the past for supplement needs, and I hope she's not listening. but she put us under a lot of tension and stress about 2 years ago over our ingredient labels. And that's why if you look at our ingredient labels, they are immaculate. Mm-hmm. From an ingredient listing perspective, from a regulatory standpoint of how everything is labeled on the label, we have a standardized label based on, I guess, we went the route of seeking out legal advice from a food and supplement authority within the UK, and they helped advise us on, each ingredient we had in our products, the legality of it or potential legality that those ingredients could bring. And then something as simple as we had liver stack. Now, from a labeling standpoint, you can't put an organ within your label, the name of an organ.
Interesting.
So if you look at the liver stack, we have liver and a small little tiny asterisk beside liver. And then if you look further on the label, that little asterisk results to a ingredient claim that choline supports liver health. And that's how you get around that technicality of your label claim. So in other words, how you label supplements in the UK is a lot more, I guess, has to be a lot more stringent than the US. You really have a lot of scrutiny. And the same applies then when you start shipping into Europe and the EU, the same sort of label claims apply. So Lukasz has it there, so he probably sees it, the little star on it.
Yeah, I got it. Yeah.
The one other thing on the pre-focus, and then we can move on to some of the products in the lineup, or we can field some of the listener questions that are going on. Something that we don't really see a whole lot. So you've got 600 milligrams of the alpha GPC. I'm assuming that's the 50% alpha GPC. So you're getting 300 milligrams of that.
Yeah. Always. That's obviously without going the route of some of the trademark forms like alpha size. I always push for the 50%. So that's what we have in PM priming stack. So we just went with the same 50%. Yeah. And that's it. That's a really interesting side, because I guess when you look at alpha GPC as a supplement for regular Joe soap, they never actually look, or the label never actually shows standardized to 50%. Right. So you sort of look at the product and go, 600 milligrams of alpha GPC, that's a really high dose. And, it could be even a 20, 25% standardized product where they're not even getting a quarter of what's on the label. And that's sort of where we've maintained, again, the same transparency of what's on the label. If we can break it down further to show it to the customer, we will. And that's where with the Alpha GPC is the 50%.
Yeah, and then the interesting is like you've got that in combination with 500 milligrams of CDP choline and then 100 micrograms of huperzine. So I mean that's like a whopping cholinergic stack you've got going on there. You ever get any feedback about maybe like a choline overload, or it's like sending people into a brain fog almost, or anything? Just because
you can, yeah, and that is a very an interesting standpoint. I guess it does come down to another thing that people need to consider is how easy it is to choline overload without really understanding what you're doing. So the likes of the liposomal range that we have, the liposomal range is all based on a phosphatidylcholine base. And I've had complaints in the past of, I've taken liposomal curcumin, to glutathione, and CoQ10, and I feel real lightheaded and dizzy. I need to around go, well, when you do increase choline to a considerable extent within the body, it can lead to extremely low blood pressure and lead to brain fog because of how it affects blood circulation. So it definitely is something that you'd have to consider outside of that stack itself of what else that person is taking, even diet-wise, between egg yolks and other choline-rich foods. So, that is a good question.
It's something I've been wanting to, like Robbie and I have had these discussions offline about coming up with like a duo complex of the two of them with something. It's just, I've made the mistake before because a lot of products, like you've seen, like huperzine is getting lumped into anything and everything these days between like EAA formulas, you're getting them in pre-workouts, you're seeing them in some fleet formulas and nootropics. And so I made the mistake, this was a couple of years ago, I think I must have taken like 4 different products in one day. So I had a nootropic, I had a stem-free pre-workout, I had taken a sleep supplement, and like it just compounded in my system. And I spent like a week just in this constant haze where I couldn't figure out, up from down with everything. And so I was always wondered with that. Usually if I'm doing a choline thing, I'll kind of do like you did in the formula. I'll keep the huperzine on the lower end if I'm using it at all. But then I'll go with, 300, 500 milligrams of CDP choline. Just that's my preferred form of choline versus alpha GPC. So it's interesting in combining the two of them in a pre-workout setting like that.
Yeah. That was, again, I wanted to do something a little bit different to what's out there, similar to probably what you and Robert were trying to do. And, when you look at other products, they either choose one or the other. And to be honest, yes, each of them have their pros and cons. But I think from a concentration perspective, just the glycerophosphate and how that affects the transport of the choline in the brain. For me personally, anyway, I find that gives a very calming and relaxed, focused setting versus what the CDP choline does. And I guess that's probably where, other than the potential impact that glycerophosphate can have on growth hormone secretion, that's why I chose the high dose of alpha GPC for the PM priming stack.
Yeah, very, very good points. Yeah, and to your point, that the CDP choline I definitely find is more energizing, where alpha GPC is kind of that calm kind. I don't even know how to describe it. It's a more calming focus. I guess that's the best way to describe it, as you said there. With your background in pharmacology and the synthetic organic chemistry, have you ever thought about kind of maybe engineering or kind of like coming up with your own kind of new stimulant? So we've got dynamine, teacrine, Zynamite, and extra, regular caffeine, all the other fun kind of like caffeine derivatives, PEAs, all that. Have you ever thought about like going down the wormhole and just finding out maybe some kind of like creating your own new stimulant to kind of just, bring them up?
I have, but I guess when I moved out of academia into industry, so like I said, I'm a chemical engineer for Intel, I left that sort of synthetic background behind and moved more into, I guess, what I currently deal with is more like plasma physics and chemical engineering and mechanical engineering. But when I was at university and I had access to the likes of SciFinder, Reaxis, a lot of the computational based programs, then yeah, if I was still in academia, I'd definitely be dabbling in, running some, I guess, computer-based models on, certain structures and try and figure out, what is available to us, because to be honest, we can do structure activity relationship studies very easily with, I guess, de novo calculations, where we take whatever receptor we're looking at and we run it through a simulation program to, I guess, find the lowest energetic model state that fits that receptor.
Mm-hmm.
And then we take that molecule and obviously do then retrosynthesis to go backwards to see how we create that molecule. It's definitely something that's come across my mind a few times, but I guess that's sort of where you have companies like Compound and other trademark companies paying formulation chemists like that to do that exact work.
I imagine.
There was so many big words that I kind of I was just like, so I kind of got the idea what he was saying, but I had to wait till the sentence finished, and then I'm like, oh yeah. I don't remember any of those words, but I kind of get what you're saying.
So like when we're trying to figure out like even like an ingredient for a product.
Oh no! I got what you mean, but it was just the way you described it. I was like, these words don't. They're not daily for me. I tell you that.
Yeah. And like, I mean, even for me now, outside of academia, I don't have access to a lot of the same journals as what I would have had in academia. So it does make it makes it a little more difficult to get through the literature compared to when I was at university.
Mm-hmm.
Because when I was at university, I had access to pretty much any journal I could think of. And if I was doing, the beauty of, say, SciFinder and Reaxis was you could put a chemical structure into the program and it would search the literature for that compound.
Mm.
So anywhere that compound's name was mentioned or that compound structure was published, it brought you up the paper. So it made it very easy for me to find papers on molecules that I was trying to synthesize. But I guess the reverse of that would be then if you were trying to find derivatives of, say, xanthine, similar to the dynamine or teacrine, you could put the xanthine or the metal xanthine backbone into Reaxis and it would go through the literature finding everything that's been published, and it'd be up to you then to decide, oh, well, that looks like an interesting molecule. Because, academia and chemistry is funny in certain ways in that you create all these molecules, I guess, for...
Yeah, see? I'm not alone.
I'm Dr. Bean speaking my language, man. We've got that engineering glove going on
right now.
I'll call on the Dragon Zord. So what happens with chemistry, I guess, in academia is you have all these guys that are trying to, I guess, shit on one another to create molecules, but you actually never study them. They figure out all these synthetic pathways and we've made this fantastic molecule, but you never actually take it down the road of doing structure activity relationship studies. So they actually investigate the molecules they've made. So it wouldn't surprise me if you were to go down this route of researching the literature for compounds that have been created. They'd probably find some nice things that if you were to then take it on to, say, rat model studies or even just computational model studies, that you might find some novel ingredients that might be worth then trying to isolate.
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm wondering. So, like, is that where, like, the next frontier is for us to kind of find new chemicals and new ingredients? So we'll have cell culture studies, we'll have some of these rat studies, but there's a succinct lack of information on the human side of things, like what is it? And so do these modeling programs, so they can help us identify compounds, are they to the point, or are they advanced enough to where we could simulate, so we know what receptors they're going to bind to in the human body, but can it also simulate what's going to happen as far as, like, as it traverses the GI system, and, like, it can account for bioavailability to see, hey, maybe we can work out a human equivalent dose, and this is what it might be based on this simulation, to where we could figure out what this stimulant would do, or this new natural anabolic agent could do, or something along those lines?
So you will end up with, when you do, I guess, computational work, you can try and predict the pharmacokinetics of how the drug interacts at a receptor. And then you can obviously try and take a guess at the pharmacodynamics, which is how the drug moves through the body.
Right.
And I guess based on the structure of the compound, you could then probably make a guess based on different acidic points within the molecule on how susceptible it is to hydrolysis, because that's obviously the main mechanism that destroys stuff that goes into our stomach. The hydrochloric acid hydrolyzes C double bond O bonds or hydrolyzes a carboxy down to hydroxy, and then you actually lose function of that molecule because of hydrolysis. I guess when you then isolate compounds that have an effect, the delivery mechanism then is obviously where the future, I think, lies, and whether that's a nanolipid or solubilized compounds similar to the liposome technology.
Right.
That's a lot more readily accessible to the population versus, I guess, injection-based method routes that are a little more daunting to the average person. And that's sort of where I guess the popularity of liposomes in the last 5 to 6 years has come about in the supplement industry, because it's made products that are normally susceptible to hydrolysis, like CoQ10, glutathione, curcuminoids, more readily available to be absorbed to the body. And I guess then the beauty of the liposomes is that it's actually uptaken into your cells by phagocytosis. So you're actually delivering the liposome into the cell, and the cell then actually devours the liposome to release the contents of the product. So that sort of nanolipid technology to me is more so not necessarily the future, but we need to actually understand delivery mechanisms more so than the compounds themselves, because we then find, I guess, the other side, and I encountered this with my PhD, was that you can make all these fancy molecules that are organic based, that will dissolve in organic solvents, but our bodies aren't organic. Our bodies are aqueous. So ultimately, when you create therapeutics, you want something that is water soluble, that can actually be transported in your blood, as opposed to forming like a phase solvent distribution sort of setup where you have, I guess, hydrophilic carriers taking your molecule through the blood and trying to deliver them to the site of action, as opposed to being readily, I guess, dissolvable within your aqueous bloodstream and being transported through the body through that method. So I guess it's like a double-edged sword of where you sort of go from creating your ingredient and being able to isolate it, and then actually then trying to figure out how you're going to deliver that to the consumer. And that's the same principle applies when we're trying to create pharmaceuticals.
Yeah, we're always looking for the most efficient way for the body to take it and utilize, while also keeping, I guess, the dosage in a moderate or acceptable range.
Yep.
Interesting. This is a question that we got a couple weeks back, and I had forgotten about it. And since we've got you on here, Dr. Dean, I thought I'd like to get, because you've got a background, you're a competitive bodybuilder, but you've also got the organic chem background and everything. Said from Concrete Abdullah, I've read people say they get a pump from Cialis. It's far more potent than pump product ingredients, which, yeah, that's pretty much going to be spot on the money. Cialis is a drug. The rest of their stuff is supplements. But he said, have any of you used Cialis or any other kind of PDE5 inhibitor as a pump pre-workout? And Dr. Dean, do you think there could be any mechanism? Do you think, we always talk about getting a pump and how it's good for muscle building, but do you think these could have any, downstream effects as far as protein synthetic response or muscle protein and like anabolic signaling?
Not that I've seen in the literature towards, inhibiting phosphodiesterase. I've never seen anything in the literature to suggest that if you inhibit the PDE enzyme either, locally within penile tissue or globally throughout the body, that it's going to have a detrimental effect on, I guess, either androgen receptor signaling that's going to yield, muscle protein synthesis. And that's sort of looking at even Pump Plus, the Amento pump. If you look at the research there, that is technically a PDE inhibitor also. There's some isoflavones within Amento pump that have PD inhibiting properties. So no, to ask that person's question, I don't see there being a detriment to using Cialis as a pre-workout to aid vasodilation, other than, I guess, the half-life of the compound and causing potential blood pressure issues post-workout.
Just they go hypo.
Yeah, and that being said, I know that Cialis and Viagra are used actually in certain pre-workouts. I mean, obviously made somewhere in the basement, but there's that Russian company. What's the name of it, Shane?
Yeah, it's a Black Label.
Black Label, yeah. They use, I believe, Viagra in their pre-workout, as far as I remember. I'm pretty sure they do. I've seen it actually a few times, and believe it or not,
tiny.
I actually judged quite a few NPC shows where guys would be popping Viagra's backstage for vascularity and stuff like that, which was absolutely ridiculous.
It's freak label.
Freak Label. I'm sorry. Yes. Yes.
I always got like a mix up, but yeah, they have a standalone series, and that's one of them. They only have like 3 complex products, and then they've got the core line, and in there is the master of them all. Yeah.
Oh, nice. Standalone. You can stack it up with other stuff.
Dr. Dean, I have a question. You've competed as a bodybuilder, right? So
yeah.
I think this is going to be quote unquote a natural question because it kind of like begs to be asked. Considering you're doing, you're an advisor and a formulator, have athletes approached you? And I'm not implying anything by any means, but have any athletes approached you to do contest preparations, since you're clearly knowledgeable not only in supplements, but I would assume also anabolic steroids?
Yeah, and I've prepped some pretty well-known people. I'm not going to mention names, but I have helped prep a couple of IFBB pros. So yeah, I do like from a fun perspective, I run like a consultation service of, people can have a chat with me and we'll discuss pharmacology and I guess safe anabolic practices, because that was sort of one of the reasons why I became so vocal as an educator on Jordan Peters' website was growing up. So obviously growing up with bodybuilding in my early 20s, and then obviously getting involved and intrigued by the anabolic side of things. And then obviously in my education background, some of the stuff I was seeing on forums was just horrifying.
Yeah, no, I believe that. I actually had Dorian Yates in my house a couple of years ago, and I was always very outspoken about it. I don't feel like there is anything to hide, and we talked about like different things, and Dorian was joking, and he says to me, would you like to see my my cycle, my contest prep cycle for, I believe it was 94, 95 Mr. Olympia? And I said, yeah, sure. So he gives me like this list, and he goes to me, he says, have a look. And I'm looking at it, and I obviously, I would assume that he would take more than an average Joe, but that list was absolutely ridiculous. I mean, it was something enough to kill a person. And I'm like, are you fucking kidding me? You took all that. And he looks at me and he says, you know what? He says, I printed it out from a website that somebody claims that he knows that I took. He says, half of these things, I don't even know what they are.
Yeah.
So
I remember hearing an interview with Dorian, and he said that he took just like maybe 2 or 3 compounds, and that's basically.
He was very, very basic. Yeah, he was very
he
basic.
First,
nothing outrageous.
He didn't have that much access to much stuff, and to back in the days, the stuff was completely different than nowadays. So
yeah,
that's another thing.
I had a very interesting discussion with a certain fighter from UFC actually a little while ago, and obviously USADA right now is busting everybody for drug use, for PED use in UFCs. Yet there is a strong belief that that fighters are still doing PEDs. And do you think that do you believe that a war on steroids, specifically in drug-tested sports, can be won, or do you think that they'll be able to either mask certain ingredients, or they will be coming up with new inventions that's that are not detectable as of yet? Just wanted your opinion on it.
So my opinion on it is that, and I've seen this because I've given guest lectures on the pharmacology of anabolic steroids and the health implications, and this has been to general practitioner doctors as a form of CP. And what always astounded me was the lack of education that these GPs received at medical school when it came to steroids, almost to the point of, they have the stigma of steroids are bad. Anyone that takes steroids is evil. Like, first and foremost, most anabolic steroids, even testosterone, was a therapy. It was isolated as a therapy, as a drug for medicinal purposes. Dianabol, Anavar, we have compounds that were specifically designed as medicines that unfortunately then some clever person with a background in pharmacology went, hang on, if this heals burns and burn patients, what if we, doubled or tripled the dose and gave it to an athlete? Because it must be having some sort of an effect on muscle protein synthesis. And that's exactly what happened with Dianabol. Dianabol was originally prescribed at 5 milligrams within medicine, and by the early 80s, you had athletes taking 30 to 50 milligrams of Dianabol, and obviously then running into health issues because you never understood the effects of what anabolic steroids do to the androgen receptors throughout the whole body, not specifically just muscle. And we then started to see obviously atherosclerosis and potential liver cirrhosis, liver damage. Whereas if you actually understand the pharmacology of these compounds, there is a technical way to use these in a quote unquote safe manner.
Absolutely.
It's fundamental that people with access to medical diagnostics fundamentally understand how these drugs work, rather than this stigma of, oh, you take steroids, you're an idiot and I'm not going to treat you. And actually understand that these compounds can be specifically used in a relatively safe manner. Otherwise, we wouldn't be prescribing them as medicines.
Well, I'll give you an example that I would say that was my last fight in United States. Was in your sport, basically in Muay Thai, and the commissioner of the state of New Jersey, I disclosed information. I actually called him up and I said that I have a legal prescription for testosterone for therapeutic, obviously, reasons, because I was in my late 30s already. And he said, yeah, that's fine. So, I continued basically to use it. I disclosed fully information, and I didn't even think if there's going to be anything about it. When I showed up the day of the fight, they immediately sent me to give a urine test. And again, I didn't think anything of it because I'm using a prescription by a doctor. I'm following the protocol and everything else. So I have nothing to be worried about. I did the test. I clearly knew that my testosterone levels are going to be elevated. After the fight, I received a letter, I think about a week or two later, that I've been suspended for a year, basically punished. And when I called the commissioner, I said, I don't understand. I have a legal prescription. I didn't overdose. I didn't add anything that is illegal. I've done absolutely nothing wrong. Technically, I'm taking my medicine. He said that by the law of the state of New Jersey, you're not allowed to use even therapeutic, which basically is, so say, for example,
I kind of knew that though.
Yeah, it's big, and that was 7 years ago, 8 years ago. So it was the state of New Jersey, Nevada, and California that came up with it initially. And so basically what it says is that if you are prescribed X, prescription, any medication for whatever condition you have, you're basically not allowed to use it because the state says so. So I agree with what you're saying. Steroids, and specifically testosterone, the anabol or anavar, which I believe was even prescribed to children, they were basically invented to help people for specific reason to help. So yet me and other people that could still continue in certain sports, given that obviously in the late 30s, early 40s, you don't produce as much testosterone as somebody in his early 20s or whatnot. So I think it evens up the competition. And obviously, with the training and everything for recovery and just to function, it can prolong your career in a certain sport. Now you're not allowed to use it. Again, just wanted your perspective on that.
Yeah, to me, it just seems like a ridiculous concept to have a specific law in one state, which is typically like a country, and then someone else can use it in another county or another country. With sports, and we always come back to the argument I always put to people with even Olympian level athletes or strongmen or some of the guys that compete in World's Strongest Man. People are intrigued by freaks of strength or immense, athletic feats that if you were to remove all these compounds, sport would be very boring, or the boundaries of sport would never continue to progress. To me, a safe model practice of AAS use and even testosterone use is probably the best course forward going into the future. But the other sort of double-edged sword to this is that, and I experienced this again from a consultation perspective, or even an inquiry perspective for consults, is that you then have 20-year-olds that want to go down the route of using anabolic steroids when they have no reason to consider such for many years to come. And my fear is, from a pharmacology perspective, is that in the next 10 years, we're going to see a massive mental health crisis that's driven by anabolics use within young individuals in their early 20s that completely disregard the neurotoxicity potential that AAS have on your body. And the underlying depression that can result from that change in, neurodegeneration within the brain. And that is a huge side effect that no one even considers with steroids. They're all afraid of having heart attacks, kidney failure, some extent, some compounds, liver failure, or like I said, cholestasis and liver inflammation. But no one actually sits back and understands that, these compounds drive dopaminergic signaling within the brain. Estrogen drives dopamine transport that, when you remove steroids, we have a big problem currently that I see regularly when I do consults, and it's called anabolic steroid-induced hypogonadism. And it's basically someone has ceased use of anabolic steroids, has regained their HPTA function, so their hypothalamic pituitary testicular axis, so they're naturally producing testosterone again. Their blood serum values are all perfect for the two fertility hormones, the luteinizing hormone and follicle stimulating hormone. But they have massive issues in neurochemistry imbalance, where they have absolutely no drive in their life. They have complete lack of libido. They have issues with sleeping. Yet on a serum level, their physiology is perfect. But we have this issue now where during neurogenesis and obviously during, dopamine receptor threshold signaling, that person is looking for this massive dopamine drive from that high androgen concentration in their brain, that when they go back to their natural level, the neurons are still over here and it's not getting enough dopamine. So they're going around feeling like crap. Yeah. And what ends up happening there is that person then decides, well, when I was on steroids, when I took testosterone, I felt great. So I'm going back on taking steroids when there's actually nothing wrong with their HPTA. It's the neurochemistry that has become imbalanced. And to be honest, when something like that happens, and with how your receptors within your brain, how the neurons themselves, when their voltage threshold potential is too high, there's absolutely nothing you can do to reverse that other than time and removing the stimulus to allow that electron voltage potential to drop back to where it should be. And you end up with this scenario where technically drugs like testosterone aren't physically addictive per se, but if they end up causing a dopamine signaling issue like that, where when they resume testosterone therapy or resume testosterone abuse, that this dopamine signaling comes back again, then you have a scenario where that person is reliant on testosterone in order to feel like a human being.
Would it be possible to do like some kind of mixture of like uridine monophosphate, CDP choline, and like an L-dopa or L-tyrosine stack to kind of help recalibrate their dopamine receptors and regenerate them to a certain degree?
So I've had this discussion with several people have come to me with this same scenario. Mm-hmm. And the issue there is, if you think about it, so L-dopa, tyrosine, phenylalanine, any sort of the L-dopa precursors, yes, we could drive dopamine synthesis in the brain. Mm-hmm. But the issue isn't that there is not a specific lack of dopamine in the brain. It's that the receptor, the threshold, the gated voltage of that neuron is so high that it needs a massive amount of neurotransmitter to see an effect.
Gotcha. Okay.
So if you're putting precursor in, you're sort of adding fuel to the fire where you're never allowing those neurons to come back to their normal potential. So you're basically getting around the problem with massive doses of, I guess, dopamine derivatives in order to keep up with the neuron's potential. Mm-hmm. But never really address. So if that person misses doses or, goes days without taking L-dopa or mucanopurines or tyrosine, whatever sort of form they feel best driving that dopamine synthesis in their brain and dopamine transport, they're never going to fall back to that normal level. So I always say to people, yes, you can fix how you feel now currently with massive dosages of L-dopa and tyrosine and, I guess, trying to limit dopaminergic activities where you're not sort of seeking dopamine all the time.
Yeah.
But you're sort of prolonging the inevitable that the neurons themselves, I don't know from experience whether, at some point in the future, even with supplementation, does that neuron fall back to its relaxed potential previous to androgen stimulation. But to me, the simple answer that I give most people when they fall to that scenario is it's just patience.
Yeah.
You have to ride this out. The simple solution is going back and taking androgens and driving that neurosignaling again. But you're sort of, unless you're sort of going to commit to TRT for the rest of your life, it's not the route to go down.
What would you say? I'm sorry. What would you say is the fine line between? I don't like to use the word steroid, but okay, that's the only word I guess that comes to mind.
Special sports supplements.
Yeah. What would sports psychology supplements? What would you say the fine line between use? Necessary use because it's necessary for certain sports, athletes, and levels. Use and abuse.
Okay, I guess how you'd get around this is if you had a standardized, approved level of testosterone in amateur sports.
Okay.
So, in other words, we set a range where we say, okay, for high-level competitive athletes or even professional athletes within a professional sport, that we say set the threshold of a serum testosterone level of maybe between 25 and 30 nanomolar, which is the top upper range of natural. Regardless of how you get to that level, whether it's with TRT or natural, you end up in a scenario where everything is level playing field. So you have someone who's genetically falling at 30 nanomolar naturally, competing against someone who might have a testosterone level of 8, now using TRT to bring their level to 30. Because if you can imagine, I had to laugh at this. Obviously, with blood work, the ranges within blood work are dictated by the population who use that specific laboratory. Mm-hmm. And so it doesn't matter. You can have very sick people, you can have very healthy people, and you have averages in the middle. And that's where the range comes from. currently the testosterone level within the UK for a male between 25 and 40 goes anywhere from 7.5 up to 32. So you can fall at 7.5, which in American is probably somewhere around 290 or 300 nanograms per deciliter, which is abysmal.
Right.
Competing against someone who has levels up at 30 nanomolar, which could be, somewhere around 11 or 1200 nanogram per deciliter. So that person who's at 8 nanomolar, if they end up going from 8 then to 30, they're in essence tripling their testosterone level, but they're staying within this defined range that athletes are allowed to be within.
Okay.
Because I remember when I was a competitive swimmer, they were saying it wasn't necessarily the level they looked for. They said it was the rise. So I remember when I would ask people, I'd say, "Hey, is my local body?" I'd say, "Hey, what about the supplement here?" And they said, "Look, nothing on it that's dodgy, but if it increases your testosterone, you're going to get flagged. It doesn't matter what your current testosterone level is; it's if it increases. If there's a jump, then they'll look into you." Because I feel that's a bit tricky though, because if you set a standard, you have that female runner way back who was flagged for naturally high testosterone. She didn't take any steroids, but you can look her up. I can't remember where she was from, but she was a beast. She was fast as hell, but they ruled her out because she had naturally high testosterone.
Yeah.
So I guess if you increase the standard level, you ruin the natural talented people, I guess, would lose out.
No, that is very true, and I guess female use of AS is completely different because obviously trying to set a level in females for test use. But if you set a level playing field where the guy who has a test level of 8 can now be, I guess, on a competitive level playing field to someone who's naturally at 25, who's 3 times their natural level. You're now I guess making it a little safer that guys aren't going to get to the point where they're all going to have levels in the 80s and 90s. But which we know isn't the case. We know that a lot of
I've always thought that it would be badass just to be like, look, everyone go no drugs, and then we're going to have a drug Olympics, like a drug league every 4 years, because I've always loved the idea of being like, maybe someone can run under 9 seconds. Maybe someone can run like the fucking wind. Maybe an Olympic lifter could clean and jerk fucking 300. Who knows? But it would just be cool. But then obviously in that case you would get the bodybuilding problem where everyone would be like, well, let's just push the hell out of it, see how good we can get.
And that's the thing where people start to think more is necessarily better. But when it comes to more so what you're hinting at is polypharmacy, where you add X and Y together. X and Y together doesn't necessarily mean one effect. X and Y can make things a whole lot complicated and more detrimental than being positive. But people don't see beyond that.
Some of these guys, though, like some of the things that these Olympic champions, and they're willing to sacrifice some shit just to get that. So I mean, I wouldn't put it past them to be. I guess that's a problem, but it would still be very cool to see the ultimate of human potential.
I forget now who it was, but it was in a paper, I think, where they put the question to Olympians, and he said basically, if you're going to die in 5 years and win a gold medal,
become a champion.
I
remember that it was back in the
gold medal.
It was before the 2000s, and I remember reading about that, and they were saying that it was like 60% were like, fuck yeah. But see, I thought it was interesting. They did they redid it. They redid the study recently, not recently, but like 10 years later. Apparently the numbers were drastically different. I just feel like people were lying, but still, they did it. I thought that was crazy, that mindset.
I think it increased. That.
No. I remember looking. That's why it's not so popular anymore. It's because they redid it, and they were like, it was something like 60-70% the first time. It was insane.
But you see, this comparison, between athletes and taking drugs and everything, I remember reading an article, and it was like two different person. One guy who didn't take anything and he could like just stare at the steroids, and he would be like an amazing athlete. And the other person would take like a shit ton of stuff, you know. He
Wouldn't do
would
anything.
have like a full stash in his house, and he couldn't do shit, you know. So that's the thing, you know. The genetics played a big role in this whole entire thing. So yeah,
You know, it ultimately does, because I mean, even the same. Steroids are very interesting because not only do you have, I guess, the nuclear expression that happens in the androgen receptor, and that ultimately drives the ergogenic benefits we're looking for.
Mm-hmm.
We also then have the genetic capabilities of drug metabolism.
yeah,
And what you see there then is you have people who have either plus variants in CYP enzymes, which makes them, you know, ultra metabolizers, where no matter what they take, their body's excreting it extremely quickly. So they never really see a therapeutic benefit unless they take massive amounts.
just like me, caffeine.
And then you have guys who have, you know, minus, where they're slow metabolizers, where I've seen this personally, where guys have taken, you know, maybe 75 to 80 milligrams of testosterone, and their test level is in the 60s.
Yeah.
Because of how slow their body metabolizes the drug.
Yeah.
And that person may be then a hyper responder to the drug.
Mm-hmm.
And you have this scenario where you have athletes being very transparent, saying, this is what I take, and people going, oh, that's bullshit. And it's like, well, actually, from a pharmacological perspective, it is quite possible that that person has one, very slow metabolism of the compound, meaning they need very little. And then two, they have this extreme nuclear expression where they have, you know, depending on what sport they're in, you know, mainly type 1 fiber expression or type 2, you know, you have to take that all into consideration as well. So there is, I guess, the skepticism that has come out is really driven by the internet and people putting ridiculous stacks of steroids.
Yeah.
Now, whether that's because they're getting fake stuff that isn't dosed correctly, or we have this scenario where they're an ultra fast metabolizer and the compounds do nothing for them.
Yeah.
You know, that drives this culture we're heading into now, where people think, you know, more is inevitably better.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
And then obviously then the polypharmacy of, you know, if I take testosterone, but if I add nandrolone and I add an oral on top, I'm going to get results twice as fast.
Yeah. I don't know if you remember, you know, the forums and everything, but back in the days, you know, some topics and like some threads were crazy. Like people were like asking, you know, other person, what should I take? How much should I take? It's like, it's insane, you know. And you know, nowadays it's I think it's even getting worse, because like people are also asking other like guys, especially these online coaches, you know, about the dosages and everything, without just like seeing a person and seeing his lab tests and anything like that. So that's crazy to me.
I mean, that's even, you know, anyone that sort of goes that route of, I guess, consultation practice with me to discuss this very topic.
Yeah.
The very first question they get asked is, have you got blood work within the last week?
Yeah.
And if they don't have blood work, I'm not entertaining any discussion with them.
Yeah.
Because first of all, if this is someone that's trying to enter into the realm of AAS use, they need to understand where their natural HPTA axis is functioning as stands.
Mm-hmm.
So, like the example I gave there earlier about the guy between 8 nanomolar and 25 nanomolar, say naturally you have a level of 25 nanomolar. You're sort of in the upper mid-range of normal. If you were to take a standard dose of testosterone that's sort of put on forums of your first cycle, say, let's say 300 milligrams of testosterone, that's going to say, on average, put someone's level maybe around 65, 70 nanomolar.
Yeah.
Now, that's pretty much tripling their testosterone level from 25 up to 75.
Right.
Now, for someone who has naturally a test level of 8, you apply that same dose to them and they go from 8 to 65. They've now, you know, and there's a multiplication factor there now of 8 times their natural level. Now, is that wise for that person to go to such extent? You know, you're you're basically trying to make people think logically behind these drugs and how they're applied therapeutically.
Yeah.
Whereas if you took that person at 8 nanomolar and took them to 32, you've now, quadrupled their testosterone level versus what they make naturally. They're going to see a huge benefit. And they're going to be taking maybe 120, 150 milligrams of testosterone as their first cycle, where they're quadrupling their test level.
Yeah.
And you need to start, making people, going down this tangent of anabolic steroids, you need to make people aware of the actual implications of how these compounds work and understanding their natural HPTA baseline of what we're trying to manipulate here using these compounds.
Right.
Yeah.
Along those lines, what supplements, because we've gotten this question before and I've kind of just punted it down, but since you're kind of a specialist in this area, you could speak and give a little bit greater insight into it. What are some, I guess, supplementation protocol differences between natural versus enhanced things, like natural versus enhanced athletes? What, I guess, specific compounds, what supplements, natural supplements, have you found benefit for the guys that are using the special sports supplements?
So when it comes to anabolic users, and this is sort of how I came about, to go back to like formulating, this is how I came about, the liver stack, the Ashtrag flow, which was originally the kidney and blood pressure stack, and then the liver, the CV stack, or heart stack is what it was originally. They were ingredients that sort of addressed how these compounds cause disease. So in other words, when we take super physiological levels of testosterone, where we're gone outside our natural normal range, and this same thing applies if someone goes from 8 nanomolar naturally to 25, they're technically super physiological. So someone's taking TRT, even though they're quote unquote within the natural range, they're still going from 8 to 24, which is tripling their testosterone levels. So people need to be mindful of that when they're using TRT, because the disease processes that happen from testosterone use still come from that change in testosterone level outside their normal level. So how steroids, I guess, negatively impact health, liver health wise, injectable testosterone doesn't really have any significant effect to the liver, to be honest.
Yeah.
Other than a super physiological level of testosterone will stop stem cells from infiltrating into the liver. So as we know, the liver has mesenchymal stem cells that form a stem cell in the spleen that can infiltrate the liver. When the liver gets damaged, these stem cells move in and create new hepatocytes.
Yeah.
So when you have an elevated testosterone level, that process of infiltration is actually stopped by the androgen receptor activation. So you now have an issue where the stem cells can't go in to heal your liver. That becomes a big problem if someone has used alkylated oral steroids that cause liver cell death, because you now have cells, hepatocytes, that have been killed as a result of detoxing the alkylated steroids, but you now can't cause, I guess, reinfiltration of these stem cells into the liver to cause it to heal again.
Would that be something like Winstrol? Is that an example of an oral one?
Yeah.
That would be...
Yeah, Winstrol or Anavar or Anadrol, any of the oral steroids, methyl testosterone, halo testing, even some of the pro hormones from back in the 2000s.
Halo.
Dr. Martin, as far as I remember, I think only 2 that don't go through the liver, and that I think is Primobolan, the oral version, and I believe Proviron, which technically, I think they don't, but I think the tricky thing is, and Robert just brought up Winstrol. Winstrol comes in injectable and oral form, and oral I know is alkylated, so it's definitely liver toxic. What is? Would you say that injectable is less or no liver toxic?
No, it's still going to be the same, but it's still going to have the same pharmacokinetics and how it's metabolized and excreted. So it's still going to have the same mechanism with the liver of how it's excreted. The only thing that changes is the pharmacodynamics of how the drug moves through the body. So when it's a depot injection, it enters into systemic circulation a little slower than when you take it orally.
So
So you have
people
just
who think that just because it's injectable, it bypasses the liver, it's incorrect.
incorrect. Yeah, it's still as liver toxic as the oral form. And basically, with then how these compounds interact at the liver is that they cause insufficiencies in bile flow, so your gallbladder no longer secretes correct amounts of bile. You have cholestasis, where the bile ducts get blocked with cholesterol crystals, and that can cause bile backflow, where the bile can no longer pass through the bile ducts into the small intestine, and it actually flows back onto the liver. And that obviously bile is very alkaline, and it causes liver cell death as a result of flowing back on itself. Not to mention that it's carrying toxins that's trying to excrete into the small intestine as well. And so the liver stack was designed to aid in bile flow through the tudke and ox bile. So you're given a synthetic form of bile through the form of the ox bile. And then obviously the tudke, being a bile salt, is increasing the viscosity of the bile. So you're now preventing these cholestatic crystals from depositing into the bile duct, so they stay free. So I always laughed, because this is sort of what got me into educating. Was you just seen online, people were given like broad-based supplement recommendations, like steroid cycles, that, you know, if you're taking this steroid, you should be taking this supplement. And Tudka was always the one that came up. Oh, you should be taking Tudka when you're on cycle. And you know, it comes back to actually understanding the science of how the ingredient works, rather than, you know, following the I guess supplement-based recommendation. And you know, when you start to educate people, you know, well, actually Tudka improves, you know, the viscosity of your bile. Does injectable testosterone, which is bioidentical to what your body makes naturally, you know, does that cause cholestasis to the extent of an oral steroid? Not really. So, you know, Tudka in a testosterone only scenario is a relatively waste of money. So the liver stack was more so aimed at people who are either, you know, currently using oral anabolic steroids to improve bile viscosity and obviously bile flow, to lower the potential of non-alcohol fatty liver disease, where again fatty acid transport in the liver is compromised, and that's where the choline and inositol come in to act as triglyceride shuttlers to push the triglycerides from the liver to the small intestine. And then the other two was DAME and calcium D-glucarate, more so for the estrogen metabolism and excretion, to increase phase 1 and phase 2 metabolism of estrogen, which would have a positive effect on a competitor, because we're helping to remove circulating free estrogen. So that was sort of where, when I was designing the stacks for supplement needs, they had to have a sound basis to the, I guess, functional medicine root cause of how the disease happens in the first place, and then let's work backwards from there.
Do you think that like taking the CV stack and the liver stack for like a non-steroid user is a good way to use it on a daily basis, or like let's say, you know, 1 month on, 1 month off, and so on?
So for a natural athlete, again, it all comes back to their lifestyle and diet, because a lot of disease anyway is stemmed from your lifestyle and your diet ultimately. So if this person, you know, had genetic risk factors to genetically inherited non-alcohol fatty liver disease, because they have maybe issues with bile, or they have potential to form gallstones, or, you know, they might have potentially polycystic ovarian syndrome that can have, you know, root causes back to inefficient choline and inositol transport. The liver stack could be used there, but I never really specifically created the advanced health stack, is what we call it, between those three products for natural athletes. But that's not to say they don't have their applications to someone, say, you know, CV stack, how that's formulated can be used by, say, older generations, you know, people's mothers and fathers in their like 50s and 60s, because it's going to lower the LDL oxidation potential. It's going to improve how their liver produces HDL, and it's providing vitamin D and vitamin E, which again acts as arterial antioxidants. So, they are products that have use within normal populations, but weren't specifically designed for it. But the formulation still stands when it's used in another diseased population.
Yeah.
Also, you mentioned that everybody's different, obviously, even when it comes to dosages and when it comes to, different compounds and how people react. And back in the day, we had the anabolics book. We still, I think, do. And there were a lot of literature, and some of it that I did some research on was very, very contradictory to each other. It seems like more based on opinion rather than science, and some of it is definitely wrong. And I don't mind giving my personal experience. I've used anabolic steroids on and off since the age of 26, while as an athlete, and later on TRT. But regardless of that, I've never, at least to my knowledge, and I'm kind of like, I like to do my own research, and I do care what and how much and how I put in my body, obviously, and obviously regular blood work and stuff like that. I was never a smoker. I've never done recreational drugs. I don't drink alcohol. But besides that, I noticed that, certain compounds that I've used, and I haven't used everything by all means, but certain compounds that I've used that were supposed to be somewhat, I don't want to use the word dangerous, but more harsh, I would say, on your body. I noticed that I had pretty much no bad effects or worse than any other drug. And, once again, coming back to Winstrol by most accounts is considered a mild drug. Again, I'm not basing it on literature or science, just on mostly a matter of opinion of certain self-proclaimed gurus, so to speak.
Yeah.
But specifically Winstrol gave me two of the worst experiences I've had. Number one goes back about 8 or 9 years ago. While on Winstrol, it dried me so much that I actually tore my quad. And I definitely attribute that to the use of Winstrol, because I remember doing kickboxing, and I was not sparring, I was not fighting, I was literally kicking a bag, which is just low kicks, practicing low kicks. And I felt a little numbness. I felt very dry. I mean, you could see veins all over my body, so that cosmetic effect was definitely there.
Yeah.
But I felt like little spasms in my body, like my body would freeze. And I remember my leg would actually lock out a couple of times, which gave me an indication, just stop doing what you're doing. But naturally, I didn't stop. I threw another kick. I didn't even connect with the bag. It's just mid-air. I just heard like a loud pop. And, I fell down. I thought I broke my leg. And then I realized, like, how can I break my leg if I didn't hit anything? Then I realized that my quad was torn. And I like I said, I can't really point in Winstrol's direction, but I'm almost positive that Winstrol attributed to that. Not liver, not hair loss, not pimples, none of that. I attribute that to that accident. And then, once recovered and specifically did another cycle that involved Winstrol, following that, I went to see my doctor, and my cholesterol was through the roof. It was so elevated. And again, I've used other compounds before. I've eaten somewhat healthy. I just think that Winstrol contributed to my cholesterol being elevated. And again, it's considered one of the mild steroids. And I think this is where the knowledge and the science that is, I think people like you are very, very beneficial. And I think that listening to you, I mean, first of all, thank you, because I actually learned a lot from you just now. Yeah. But, I think it goes without saying that people, including me, are stupid, because we putting in our bodies things without any proper research. And we're not paying attention to possible consequences. Like you said, everybody thinks, oh, take Dynabol or take Anadrol, and you're going to kill your liver, which is not necessarily true. And those are not the only side effects possible side effects that you should be looking for. And while Anadrol is considered one of the harshest drugs, Winstrol can basically fuck you up even more so than Anadrol. You just have to research it, and there has to be knowledge behind it.
Yeah, I mean, what ended up happening with me was I became intrigued. Obviously, when I started to, I guess, research into all this and started reading literature and all that in my early 20s, the one thing that was never really being discussed online was, like you said, the mechanisms of disease, of how these compounds cause disease. So to make it quite simple, how anabolic steroids mess up your cholesterol is, one, they cause an increase in LDL receptor expression, so you increase the amount of LDL particles you create. But the more detrimental side effect, in my opinion, is that it causes an increase in hepatic lipase, which is an enzyme your liver makes to break down HDL. And that's why you see HDL being more so impacted than LDL, to be honest, when you're taking steroids. The LDL, yes, can come from androgen receptor expression, but it's more so driven by then your dietary need to facilitate lipid transport. I always sort of try and make people aware of, LDL doesn't increase for no apparent reason. Yes, you will have transient increases from how the steroid acts at the liver, but if you have higher free triglycerides, circulating through your body, they need something to shuttle that around the body, and that's what LDL is specifically designed for. Yeah. So you're going to see an expression of higher LDL. The hepatic lipase is the big issue that guys are never told about, because, and this is the shocker, in that no amount of supplements that you take to increase HDL will work when you're on cycle. And this is a very harsh reality to get through to people. And this is where the concept of blasting and cruising, where guys, take massive amounts and then cruise on a lower amount. First of all, what I said about the liver, you never have the stem cell infiltration at the liver if you're cruising on a level that still has you outside that natural range. So you have liver. So the liver carcinogenicity, the liver carcinomas that happen from steroids, are a result of time-based usage, where the liver never has a chance to heal the fibrosis that results from the AAS use.
Yeah.
But the other side then is the hepatic lipase. When you have higher androgen levels, hepatic lipase expression is increased. So you're destroying the HDL that you're making. Taking flush niacin, pantotene, citrus bergamot, any of these sort of well-known supplements that we know that have beneficial, I guess, actions on the liver to increase HDL production, are sort of being negated by the increase in hepatic lipase. So, I recently formulated CV Pro Plus, which was like the adjuvant to the CV stack to use specifically when you finished an AAS cycle, and more so when you were cruising at TRT or you've come off completely. Mm-hmm. And the reason for that was CV Pro Plus then had 50 and 100 milligrams of flush niacin to specifically increase HDL production and to offset that hepatic lipase increase. Mm-hmm. But if you were to take that product CV Pro Plus while you're on an anabolic cycle, all you're going to get is you're going to get a nasty niacin flush with no benefit, to be honest. Yeah.
It makes no sense, to be honest.
And it's this education that you're trying to tell guys that, supplements when it comes to AAS use is not an insurance policy. And I've been, very transparent from day one formulating with supplement needs. If you think taking steroids and then by buying the advanced health stack between CV stack, kidney blood pressure and liver, that you're going to be protected and nothing detrimental is going to happen to you because I formulated these 3 products, you're going to be sadly mistaken, because one, your genetics might not even suit taking those products, so it's a waste of money. Like I said, liver stack, why would a guy who's taken testosterone only need the liver stack? What I tend to tell guys if they're going down this route is 5 weeks into a cycle, when your plasma levels start to stabilize, depending on the compounds you're using, if they're medium acting length esters like enanthate, cypionate, by week 5-6 you're starting to hit stable plasma concentrations. Get your blood work done at that point, and let's see what's actually happened to your hepatic lipase expression, your total cholesterol, your liver function, your kidney function. Then assess, could these supplements have some sort of beneficial effect? But this dangerous mentality of taking supplements to remain ignorant to the health side effects of these compounds is sort of where I took a stand in the supplement industry of, it's not right to be just making blanket recommendations on forums to people. Rather, educate them how the issue stems in the first place, and then educate, okay, well, we have these supplements that might have this effect, but at the end of the day, it's not an insurance policy that something negative isn't going to happen to you.
From a liver standpoint, what is, and this is not going to surprise anybody when I ask this question, from like a harshness on the liver, what is harsher on there, anabolics or alcohol? From a metabolism and like health standpoint.
So I guess we need to look at, again, coming back to pharmacokinetics, we need to understand how the compound is metabolized at the liver. So liver metabolism is basically any process that either activates or deactivates a compound. And obviously that's how guys back in the 90s and 2000s got around the loophole with prohormones, and that they designed compounds that when they entered the liver and underwent metabolism, that metabolism caused a beneficial change to the structure of the compound, activating the steroid.
Right.
Whereas, drug deactivation or metabolism for excretion is where we change the function of the compound for excretion. So it can no longer have its effect within the body. With alcohol, I guess, when alcohol is metabolized in the liver, we tend to then break down the ethanol into formaldehyde and acetaldehyde. Those toxins then are free to enter back into the body to have secondary toxic effects, which is more so where we see the hangover the day after drinking alcohol. It's not specifically the alcohol in your system that's making you hungover. It's the effects of acetaldehyde and formaldehyde on your brain chemistry, and obviously the subsequent dehydration.
Right.
The phase 2 sort of metabolism then is your body creating more water-soluble forms of the compound to excrete in your urine, or more fat-soluble forms to excrete in your feces. So from an anabolics perspective, testosterone is acted on through several different mechanisms with your CYP enzymes within your liver. So specifically, you have CYP, I think it's 3A4, which oxidizes testosterone. So the 17 hydroxy group on the 17 carbon position, where they methylate for the oral ones, that hydroxy group gets oxidized and that inactivates the steroids. That process isn't really liver toxic, to be honest. It's, you do the hydroxylation or you have other CYP enzymes that oxidize testosterone. And then what tends to happen is you put a sulfate group onto that oxidized molecule. That testosterone derivative is now more water soluble, and you pee it out. With alcohol, I guess the more detriment there is that with alcohol and acetaldehyde and formaldehyde, they're relying on conjugation to glutathione specifically. So if you have inadequate glutathione stores, you then have a consequence here where you have, I guess, neurotoxicity being induced from formaldehyde and acetaldehyde in your brain until your body receives either glutathione recycling from cysteine glycine ingestion, or from supplementation from taking, say, liposomal glutathione or N-acetylcysteine.
Yeah.
I'd be willing to say that alcohol is probably more detrimental to your body than the likes of testosterone by itself. But if we were to compare alcohol to the alkylated oral steroids, they're pretty much on par to one another, to be honest, because they then do rely on conjugation through glutathione.
Mm-hmm.
And that was more so where when I joined Supplement Needs, the sort of after sleep stack, liver stack, and the kidney blood pressure and whatever, I said to Lee, what about bringing out a liposomal range? And that was sort of then where we went down the route of the Cetria, liposomal glutathione, the three-peak curcumin and resveratrol.
Yeah.
I said to him, there's a gap here in the UK market where we don't have these bioavailable forms of supplements that are hugely beneficial. And especially, for the enhanced athlete, liposomal glutathione, in the context of taking, hepatotoxic oral steroids, is not a lifesaver, but it makes a huge difference to your liver health and your liver enzymes.
Yeah,
correct. But wouldn't it be, instead of worrying about the liposomal, like going with the branded Cetria, couldn't they just go with NAC, since that's kind of already readily available and probably cheaper?
It can, but then so the issue there with NAC then is you're assuming that everyone has the same capability for glutathione transport and glutathione reductase in the body. And you're basically then making equivalency that 600 milligrams to 1.2 grams of N-acetylcysteine replenishes glutathione at the same rate as a liposomal product. When we know that recycling, that glutathione transferase of how we recycle glutathione using GGT is a little, I guess, not less efficient, but versus taking a liposomal product where you instantly increase glutathione levels, we're waiting on the N-acetylcysteine basically to provide that cysteine sulfur bridge to create more glutathione naturally. I guess if everyone had the same genetics, then N-acetylcysteine would be a perfect supplement in that regard. Mm-hmm. And that's where I've advised people, if you want to take liposomal glutathione, the best thing to do is look at your GGT on your blood work. If your GGT is between 16 and 20, your gamma glutamyl transferase, which is one of the transporters for glutathione recycling, is operating at an efficient level to the fact that you're going to have good stores of glutathione. Mm-hmm. The funny thing with GGT, again, similar to the testosterone conundrum, is that GGT on blood work goes from 8 up to 70. So when people get their blood work back and they see GGT at, say, 55 or 60, their doctor's going to say, oh, your GGT is fine. Whereas we know from the literature, a GGT level of between 16 and 20 is indicative of excellent glutathione stores, but it's also indicative of lower cardiovascular disease risk. Because again, ultimately, GGT being able to recycle glutathione acting as pretty much the master antioxidants of your body, lowering arterial inflammation, and then lowering the potential for arteriosclerosis to develop.
Yeah.
Perfect.
But the liposomal glutathione with the alcohol was a funny thing, because I remember, I think it was 3 or 4 years ago, I put it up on my story on Instagram it was Christmas time. I was like, I'm not condoning overindulging in alcohol, but if we're intelligent here with biochemistry and you follow this supplement protocol, I guarantee you will not have a hangover tomorrow.
Should that be consumed before you start imbibing or immediately after you start imbibing?
Both. So the key here is before you start drinking alcohol, you obviously you take quite a decent serving of liposomal glutathione, so you're talking maybe about 1 gram before you drink. Then before you go to bed after consuming alcohol, you'd take another gram of liposomal glutathione alongside electrolytes. And then once you wake up in the morning, you take activated charcoal, because obviously you don't want to take activated charcoal at the same time as the other supplements.
Yeah.
But what you're doing there then is you're providing something that upon wake, the activated charcoal can then start mopping up any sort of, I guess, acetaldehyde or formaldehyde that's within the gut to excrete it out of the body. Yeah. But anyone that's followed that recommendation, I remember getting at least 40 or 50 DMs. This was the 26th of December saying, you're a genius, this is magic. I had like 3 bottles of wine yesterday and I'm fine. And it's like, the disclaimer I put after was, okay, you don't have a hangover, but that doesn't necessarily mean that your blood serum alcohol isn't elevated, so please don't drive.
Yeah.
Dr. Dean, I think that it's a golden information for Robert because, in this group, only he drinks. So basically, it's a gold for him.
I do love my bourbon. But it's not like huge. Sorry, we'll do a sidebar on this. It's not like a binge thing where it is. It's more of like a low lying here. We'll have 1 or 2 in the afternoons most nights of the week to get the wheels churning when I have to do a bunch of heavy writing. So that's kind of where it is. It's not like I'm doing 6 shots in a night or like 6 glasses of bourbon or something like that. It's more of like the low, just kind of chronic. Here's 1 or 2 or something like that. We don't go crazy, but there's just enough to shut my brain off and allow the creative juices to start flowing.
I gave up on drinking a long time ago when I like to go back to the CYP metabolism. Like when I went back through my genetics, I've plus in a lot of enzymes, meaning that I've increased metabolism, and it's really difficult for me to get drunk to the point that after like I'd say 2 or 3 years at university, that drinking, you'd get to the point where you're sort of on a buzz but never completely drunk. That was just like, what's the point in drinking? I'm the same with or without alcohol.
In Poland, we always say for this kind of a person that you are not an economical because you can't get drunk. So you spending so much money on alcohol that you can't get drunk. So they honestly tried to prove the hypothesis at my wife and I's wedding 3 years ago, where people were just buying me shot after shot. And I remember at like 4 o'clock the morning of the wedding, standing there and everyone's like hanging around me. I'm like going, Jesus, what's going on here? Like, and they seriously, like, I must have had maybe like 30 shots throughout the night and still standing. Oh, damn.
So that's why I said to that was the last time I drank. And I said to my wife, like, there is like in the last while, there's no point in me drinking when it offers the same benefit not to drink.
Well, you're cheating. You're Irish, so that's cheating. Like you were born with everybody. So you're just starting off at like the ethereal plane of alcohol metabolism.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. This will be we're at the 2-hour mark. Dr. Dean, are you still okay?
Yeah, I'm good. I can stay on for another few minutes.
Okay. Last call for questions from any of the listeners that are hanging with us still. Do you want to plug anything, Dr. Dean, while we wait for any last questions to roll in? Or are they can you give us insights into maybe what some products that are coming in the pipe work?
Yeah, I wanted to ask one question to Dr. Dean as far as the upcoming products. Maybe what can we expect from you and the supplement needs? Maybe can you share some?
Yeah, the next one, this is exclusive because I haven't even mentioned this. So the next one that we're releasing is a similar to the pre-workout. I wanted to create a glucose disposal agent. Okay. But similarly to what I'd done with Ensure with JP, where I chose, benphytamine and a couple of other ingredients that weren't really considered glucose disposal agent ingredients. I wanted to make a product that wasn't specifically a GDA because, to be honest, similar to our discussion on drugs, GDAs in the last 5 years have become this product like metformin, where if you take it, you magically get rid of carbs out of your bloodstream and magically doesn't make it get fat and whatever other nonsense goes through people's head mentally when they take GDAs, or this psychological binge of if I take a GDA, I can eat a pizza and I'll be fine.
Guilt-free cheat meal.
Yeah. But that aside, I wanted to create a product that addressed pancreatic cell health ultimately. So similar to how CV stack, liver stack, I wanted a product that got to sort of the root of, rather than the likes of berberine and I guess some of the other GDA-based ingredients, that increase glucose oxidation so you efficiently mop up some of the glucose in your blood. I wanted to sort of get to the root cause of people that might be stemming on the side of, I guess, type 2 diabetes where their beta cell function is starting to deteriorate. And whether that's self-induced or genetic, or whether there's an environmental aspect to it, the product here is ultimately aimed to, yes, increase glucose oxidation, but to improve pancreatic cell function. So we're still trying to figure out a good name for the product, but it's been manufactured. So we're just waiting on the label to be printed when I can figure out.
I literally am working on it right now. I've got it written down.
Dr. Dean, everything you're saying about these products, Shane's writing out the next update for Stack 3D as you're talking.
We said earlier you had like 7 or 8 in the works, and I was like, well,
Yeah.
I mean, he's not going to explain all of those, so I'll wait for some other juice. Here's the juice.
Yeah. So we almost have a name decided on it. So I'm not going to say what it is because I could be completely wrong then, because Lee could go, nah, we're not going to go with that. But it's basically, I've used this product with people who have consulted with me on their blood work to inevitably reverse HbA1c values that have been in the 40s down into the low 30s. So technically, this person was heading for type 2 diabetes. And we start to see that a lot of, I guess, pancreatic cell dysfunction comes from oxidative stress on the pancreas itself. So if we can provide a source of good, strong antioxidants, which is one of the reasons why alpha-lipoic acid is in some GDA products, is ultimately it's an antioxidant as opposed to a magic ingredient that gets rid of glucose out of your blood. And then looking at the mineral deficiencies, so similar to Insure with JP, there's vanadial sulfate in this product. Yeah. And as you know, vanadium has insulinogenic properties that it can mimic insulin's function of acting on GLU4 receptors and allowing glucose shuttling. Sure. So the product itself isn't going to be a product that you're going to take before your carb meal. It's going to be like digestive stack. Yeah. Digestive stack was designed to improve overall digestive health as opposed to being like, say, I don't know, Ravenous or any of the other sort of well-known appetite increasing digestive enzyme products on the market. It's more
nutrients, right? Something like this.
Yeah, so the digestive stack was, to help increase stomach acid, to lower histamine in the body, to improve parietal cell function in your stomach. It wasn't necessarily a product that you took to allow you to eat more food. Now, that's not to say if you take digestive stack before the largest meal of the day, that it's not going to have an effect on your digestion of that meal, because it is, because of the pancreatin within it. But, for example, going back to anabolics even, this was another sort of concept that I brought to the forefront, and that was anabolic steroids increase histamine in our body. They act on androgen receptors of our mast cells, which are the cells that store histamine. That increase in histamine drives stomach acid secretion. And that's where we see guys who take oral anabolic steroids suffer huge upsets in digestion from oral steroids. And that's because of the increase in histamine. And that's why there's diamine oxidase, the enzyme that breaks down histamine. That's why that's in digestive stack, because it's ultimately going to have a stabilizing effect on your mast cells. And if you're using anabolics or oral steroids that are affecting your appetite, the DAO is stabilizing that histamine release. So this product is sort of going the same sort of mechanistic route as digestive stack, that it's going to improve how you oxidize glucose. So I've purposely left out berberine because we have berberine as a standalone ingredient. Yeah. And if people want to use berberine, that's great. But in other instances, it can be gut toxic, similar to metformin. So if you get on great with metformin or berberine, then by all means, you can stack it into the product. Yeah, but I didn't want to have it as the main glucose disposal agent. The main sort of ingredient within this product that people would consider a glucose disposal agent would be bitter melon for the glycolic acid content of the bitter melon. That was the ingredient that I chose in this instance. But that's.
Do you want to discuss the dosage on that, Dr. Dean? Because I was actually looking at that for another GDA I was working on, and the studies have it at like 2 grams, but that's over the course of a day. So would you for when you're doing it, are you going to divide it maybe in like 500 doses or 1,000 milligrams? Or are you going to do like the full payload of the 2,000?
No, I have it in 500 milligrams. So the way I've structured it, how you dose it would be that it's a 6 capsule serving overall. Mm-hmm. And ideally, you do 3 capsules in the morning with your first carbohydrate meal, and then do another 3 capsules with the second largest carbohydrate meal of the day. Mm-hmm. And that way you're getting, then the payload off the bitter melon. Mm-hmm. My like I said, my biggest fob with GDAs is this sort of psychological dependence that people think they're magic supplements, and they offer their benefits, but they're not. They've really formed a psychological crux within the supplement industry, to be honest. People associate, like we said, cheat meals with taking their GDA, and magic happens.
Yeah.
Completely agree. All right. So, Dr. Dean, is there anything else you want to plug? Thank you so much. You've been on with us for 2 hours now, man. This was awesome. I know we got really into the weeds there with some of the science stuff and the physiology stuff, which I geek out over that stuff all the time. And hopefully the listeners, didn't mind us getting down too many rabbit holes. But we truly appreciate this. So if there's anything you want to unabashedly and unshamelessly plug, feel free to go ahead.
I guess if people who are listening don't follow me, my Instagram is DNSTM. With Supplement Needs, the website is supplementneeds.co.uk. Lee now has organised a EU distributor, because obviously it's a UK company. And with Brexit, we were having a bit of a headache trying to ship out of the UK. So we have an EU distributor now, and we're in the process of creating a EU distribution website. And if people want to use Dr. Dean, it's going to save, I think, 10% off their order of the Supplement Needs range. So if they want to use that, by all means, that's set up for people to use. And then we have an education-based platform that's hopefully going to launch within the next 4 weeks, which we've been sort of working on now for the last year.
Cool.
Similar to the sort of discussion I had at the start about label claims and labeling of products, and why Astrag Flow is called Astrag Flow, because you can't legally put kidney and blood pressure stack.
Yeah. We
then ran into issues where you can't make labeled claims or product claims on your website unless you have, root cause to support your claim, whether there's published research or there's an approved claim from the MHRA on that ingredient to allow you to make that claim. So we then realized that Yakult gets around this in the EU by having its own Yakult education website. So you can go to Yakult's education website, and they'll educate you on the product, not necessarily try and sell you the product, but have an education platform to tell you about the product. Mm-hmm. And so to allow me to, break down each of the formulas for Supplement Needs, we put a SN education platform that I have, a video library of all the Dr. Dean formulations, and then some of the other products like the liposomes, where we're going to have, a free video platform for consumers to go and watch how the products work, why they might want to take it, the panels, a full disclosure basically to educate people on the products, rather than, we just keep the main website mainly for business and not get, don't step on anyone's toes from a legal perspective, and have free reign on the education platform. The other sort of thing then that stemmed from that was, like I said, the original idea was that we just have a sister website where I can discuss about the products freely. Actually then stemmed into recruiting 6 of the top educators in my mind across the UK within, female coaching, male coaching, physiology and kinesiology. And I've got 2 very good nutritionists. So they're going to provide a paid content service. So obviously there's going to be a lot of free content on the website, And then if people want to then, upgrade to the paid membership side of it, then by all means they're welcome to. But I think at launch we're going to have about 110 videos that are free to watch to go. Awesome. And then from there, then the tier 2, as we're calling it, is sort of like tier 1 is very basic, where some of the basic content I'll cover is like pre, intra, and post workout supplementation, and the very basics. What I'm trying to educate here is you can have someone's mother or dad buying a supplement for their son and not really understanding, and they can go on the website and get this very basic level education that we'd take for granted, but ultimately aids the consumer making the right choice when they're trying to buy a product. And then there's sort of then tier 2 is the paid subscription sort of side, where then I'll go into actually why do we choose certain ingredients for formulations, or formulation science of why we choose this ingredient over this ingredient, or the different forms of ingredients, that I get a little more technical to sort of, I guess, edge people on if they want to go down that rabbit hole of being educated further. Yeah. So that's coming close. That's 4 or 5 weeks away from being launched, which is exciting. Very exciting.
Awesome. Well, thank you again, Dr. Dean, for all the listeners tuning in on the live stream and those who are going to catch us on the playback. Thank you for joining us. If you like what we're doing here, make sure to like, comment, subscribe, share with family, friends, and loved ones. And if you listen to this on iTunes or any other podcast perusing platform, leave us a 5-star review, as that helps us climb up in the almighty algorithm that dictates anything and everything we're exposed to these days. Thank you, my friends, for joining us, especially Dr. Dean, for hanging with us for 2+ hours, and we will catch you next time on The Final Scoop.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you.